I'm going to ask Father Michael Manning to come up, who's going to guide us through the church teaching and the technical aspects. And again, if anyone did not get the handout, now's your last chance to raise your hand for Deanna to bring it around, otherwise you're on your own.
Thank you. I borrowed a cell phone, so we'll all be on time, okay? We're on time so far, so this is really good. Thank you for inviting me. It's a privilege to be here with you this morning. Everyone take a nice, big, deep, life-filling, oxygen-riddled breath. Okay. We're going to talk about the perspective of the Catholic Church's teachings on some of the issues that face us near the end of life. And they're not, like a lot of things with the Church, the teachings are clear, they're not necessarily easy. And so we'll talk about each. Oh, I'm not used to this thing. Okay, let's see. There. Oh, come on, Pope Francis. There you go. Truly, it's as Deacon said, it's like the Pope knew we were going to have this conference today, and he was talking to at least another group of people, the Italian Medical Association. And he said human life is sacred and always quality. And he has a habit, he has a knack, it seems like, of putting these popular expressions in his homilies, that the quality of human life that people talk about all the time. And what does that mean? For some it means that may change as we certainly it changes as we age. Right? When we're 30, what we think we might never want to endure, by 65, many of us are already dealing with that quite capably and think, well, this isn't as bad as I thought about when I was 30. So quality is a very nebulous and sometimes in the modern day and age, easy way to have people put aside. Right? He said he put his talk in the context of all the Respect Life issues that are going on in our country these days. He said he gave 4 examples of false compassion. False compassion. Does anyone listen to Archbishop Sheen's tapes? And one of the things he talked about all the time was false compassion. When I heard this again, I said, oh. But what is it to be mercy killing was the whole idea about false compassion, right? It sounds like you're doing something kind, but you're actually doing something that's immoral and something quite cruel. So he said, what are some examples? First, confusing women's rights with the rights to abortion. Do that all the time in this country, right? Producing a child as a right, not a gift, in addressing IVF. Experimenting on some without consent to help others. See, there's always a good part connected, or a putatively good part connected with the evil that we're supposed to tolerate. And then finally, really what we're going to talk about today is promoting human dignity, a good thing, but by euthanasia? Okay, so he talked about and put it in a context for us today. Back in the day, when the first bills for physician-assisted suicide were making their way through the state legislatures in Oregon or Washington State, I don't remember which was first. The 2 biggest fears people had about the end of life was becoming trapped on a machine and having to bear intractable pain. In survey after survey, that's what they said. And that's why voters voted for those bills. What I want to suggest this morning is those are really terrible things that have been addressed in the last decade or so with varying degrees of success, but quite seriously. And so let's talk about them and think about them in turn. How do we avoid being trapped on machines that we don't want at the end of life? And everybody's got probably something in their head from one of the cases in New Jersey where there's fights in the courts and one sibling wants this and the other sibling wants that, and there's no advance directives. And in general, we've decided that people do have a right, and the church supports this, to delineate their care when they can no longer speak for themselves. Right? So whether we call them advanced directives, healthcare proxies, living wills, and now a kind of new supplement to all those, the provider's orders for life-sustaining treatment at the end of life, for life-sustaining treatment rather, for ambulance personnel and nursing home personnel and the people that are sort of in charge of all these liminal places where we go that they might not have the directives right in front of us, orders to be sure we don't wind up in a hospital emergency room from, let's say, a nursing home when we said we don't want to go anymore. But there was an emergency at 2 in the morning and the doctor said, right? So that was a gap. But we've worked pretty well on these things now, and we recognize that. You got, I think, as you, hopefully you took one, the Advanced Directives for the New Jersey Catholic Conference of Bishops, which is basically a summary of two ways to help speak through writing and persons when we can't speak for ourselves any longer if that happens at the end of our lives. Advanced directives, which are sort of a list of instructions, and a healthcare proxy, which is selecting a person to make the decisions guided by what we've written, but also flexible and able to understand new situations that might have not been foreseen when the papers were signed. And you can elect either one or both. Probably it's best to do both, and you can use those forms to do it. Okay? That's really all I want to say about them today. When we talk about them in detail, it's a very lengthy topic. And since we only have an hour, if we finish up a little bit before an hour, I'm happy to take questions, but mostly I'll talk about the questions that come up very frequently. If you've got a specific question, you could perhaps ask one of the presenters or me in between the breaks and later on. Okay, so first reason of I'm going to be trapped on life-sustaining medical treatment without being my will? No. You're not trapped at all. This is an important concept that the church, the moral theologians of the church at least, have said is clear enough. People have the notion that if you go into an emergency room, let's say you have really bad trouble breathing, you get pneumonia, which is really nothing to do with the fact that you've got, let's say, cancer all over your body and you really don't want to be on a respirator. You've said no. However things develop, when you come into the emergency room, they don't know that. You wind up on a respirator against what you wrote for the pneumonia. Then it's discovered that there's cancer everywhere. The person really didn't want to have a respirator. Oh, we can't stop it. And now I'm trapped. See? Okay, no. Morally speaking, the church says not starting an unwanted treatment and withdrawing an unwanted treatment are the same. It doesn't feel like it always. Right? And legally, it might not be identical, and we have some work to do, right? Once somebody's on a respirator in the emergency room who didn't want it, and you can provide that information, you can't simply just go downstairs and pull the tube out, right? So there may be an ethics committee and other things that have to be engaged. But no, you're not trapped, because once you have a feeding tube, is it forever? No. Once you start a respirator, is it forever? No. So what we're trying to do is address those big fears that we can do something about that sort of prompted people to vote for physician-assisted suicide and the choice, as they see it, of ending their lives themselves or with help. Okay? Okay, so what about pain? I'm going to be in terrible, miserable pain at the end of my life. Well, we have a long way to go, but we've come a really long way, too, in the last decade or so, 20 years ago. When I was in medical school, we were never, hardly ever were we taught how to use narcotic analgesics with patients. We just copied what our mentors did, and everybody always talks about addiction and being afraid of giving pain meds, and much more research has been done, not only on how to use the medications, but which ones to use. And until they became like oxycodone until it's become such a drug of abuse now for others. Not cancer patients, not people who are dying, they don't become addicted to drugs. It's who's got them? Our kids, right? So we have to be careful that in an effort to keep them away from the kids, we don't keep them away from the people who need them and they're dying. But so they're more readily available for the people who need them. Doctors and nurses and hospice workers are getting more knowledgeable about how to use them. And there's more research going on in pain relief. So you can't say it's no one will ever have any pain during the process of dying. But it's not. It's certainly a world different than it was only a decade ago. Okay, so those are the two biggest fears that people thought they had to sneak physician-assisted suicide into the picture. This is a very complicated topic, but let's talk about it quickly before we move on to what are the two big fears today motivating people's voting for physician-assisted suicide bills in the United States. There's a big difference, right, theoretically, between using a dose of medicine to kill someone and a dose of medicine to relieve their pain, right? You have a headache. Take 2 Tylenol or 2 aspirin or not 4 grams of morphine, right? We kind of, all right. Now, it gets more subtle than that. When someone's sick and the doses start coming up of the narcotics to relieve pain, and they get to be pretty high doses, and then we tolerate them better, so you need more and more and more and more. So can you tell by a dose what your intention is? Not always. And the church says that intention about what we do colors the moral goodness or evil of an act. So the church endorses the use of narcotic pain medicine for relief at the end of life in appropriate amounts but freely, even if it hastens death. Obviously, what are they always telling us? The best way to prevent anything is to get up and move around. Right? So one of the side effects of a lot of narcotics is you're not going to get up and move around, even if you could. So that's going to set off a chain of, you're not even going to move as much. So that's going to set off a chain of complications that may, in fact, end our lives sooner than not. But that's permitted because you're not deliberately going into a room and putting someone to sleep. I mean, permanently. Okay? Sometimes in hospice care, this gets this becomes a little bit of a challenge, especially in the last few years. How much pain medicine are they using? Why are they medicating mom when she's not even complaining and she's not even awake and there's not even any pain? Well, that's kind of one way that's kind of the new idea. You don't wait for somebody to complain about pain every 4 hours and then give them a pain med, right? But on the other hand, you don't snow them under with so much narcotic and so for this you need sort of like clinical judgment and a trust or in the philosophy of the hospice care worker and the doctor and others about how they're using this medication near the end of life. But all those caveats not put aside, but put aside for the sake of the theory, the idea about it is that we shouldn't be in pain. The church doesn't want us to suffer in pain at the end of our lives. I had someone tell me that the other day. Oh no, we're Catholics. We're supposed to suffer at the end of our lives. Oh, my goodness. Well, okay. So now what are the two big reasons now people are voting for physician-assisted suicide, PAS? Remember, fear of being trapped on machines and fear I'm going to be in pain. Those reasons have been substantially addressed. What are people saying now? I suspect the reasons that were in the bottom of it all, underlying reasons of it all the time. I'm afraid of dying, and I'm afraid of when death might come. So I'm going to schedule it. Everybody wants to schedule it, right? Every schedule, put it in your planner, okay, tomorrow, around 2 o'clock. So Some of this, these are two problems. I'm not making light of them, but some of it is just the existential human experience of being finite, being creatures of God. And there's a lot the church and spirituality can help with these, both of these, especially the first one. But it's futile and a rather cynical gesture to say, since I can't control them, I'm just going to take, ultimately, the way I can control them is to just do it now. What was the Bill Moyers show, Death on My Own Terms, or something like that a few years ago, which I thought was, that's a crazy title for the show. Death on My Own Terms. I'd rather not die, thanks. Like Mary, just, okay, beam me up. I'm done. I've caused enough damage here. I'm tired. Just take me home. So even that whole idea of death with dignity, as our Holy Father says, is an oxymoron. Let's see how we're doing with time. Okay. Now, so let's talk about an important distinction that the Catholic Church teaches is a valid one. There's a big difference between killing somebody and allowing them to die. The end result may be the same, right? Somebody may wind up dead. Because the end result is the same doesn't mean there's the same moral value to them. And when we withdraw medical treatment, see, now not everyone accepts this distinction. Some people look at the church and say, you people are parsing angels on the tip of a needle. You're just not courageous enough to say what we do when we discontinue life support, when the doctor and the nurse goes in and turns off the respirator and pulls the tube out from a person who can't breathe, they die, you killed them. Just embrace it and define the other circumstances in which we'll do it more freely. Don't pretend we're not. The church would say, no, our intentions do flavor the circumstances, and there's a difference between killing somebody deliberately and disconnecting the medical machinery that's keeping them alive. So whereas we would say we are allowing them to die when we remove the treatments, and that's different from killing them. For instance, with abortion, when if let's say a woman goes into labor and there's a baby born during an abortion, it's like, wait a minute, I was guaranteed a dead baby. You've got to kill the baby now. Those weird sort of logical things come into play. The same with taking the tube out of someone. You extubate someone, take them off the respirator. If they continue breathing, you're not entitled to smother them with a pillow. Right? What you were doing was withdrawing medical treatment, not killing them. So we have a real sense that that there are some cases where it's very clear, and there are some cases where it may be a little more difficult to discern the difference, but that there is a substantial and important difference between those two things. So when someone dies of inability, when we allow someone to die by taking the machines off of them, what the church would say is that the disease they have is killing them. Not the doctor, not the nurse, because we can't kill anyone. And that's why the insistence, on the other hand, that the church has against physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia or other things. No, we can't do that. You can't even ask us to do that because it's against the teachings of God, of the law, natural law, the way the world is made. Okay, but so not everybody agrees with the distinction. The church holds out that it's a true and valid one. The mirror image of it, the consequence of that for some is that people think about hospice care, that hospice care has to be clearly different than these other two, physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia. And it is. Theologically, theoretically, and we hope practically all the time. Does it say there's some difficulty discerning it? Well, again, if the hospice comes in like big guns with tons of narcotics and snows somebody under who wasn't particularly evidently complaining or having pain, then we have to think about that. But in general, there's a clear distinction between killing someone either by giving them meds they go home and take themselves, or by giving them a dose of something that's so massive that they die, and putting them in hospice care and allowing medical treatment that is unwanted to be foregone. What are we obliged to have? What sort of things, what sort of treatments? You know, when we were kids, and the kids still now always ask, what's going to be on the test? What do we have to do as a Catholic? You know, what's our moral obligations? As far as health care for our body, we're obliged morally as creatures that have been given custody of our bodies, as stewards of our bodies, to accept ordinary proportionate care. What does that mean? Ordinary proportionate care has two features. One, there's a reasonable hope that whatever the treatment is, it will work. And two, its benefits are greater than its burdens. Okay, again, those are each very rich in explanation, but that's the, so a reasonable hope, that means experimental chemotherapy? Yes, no? Well, you can have it if you want it. Do I have to fly Mom to Phoenix to get into the trial of PAOG drug for, no. Okay, right, so one chance, these are tough numbers to get from doctors too, right? What's the chance, doctor, this will help? No, they'll say maybe 1 in a million. Well, that's no. Or a substantially good chance. Maybe I should think seriously about having that, or asking for Mom to have it. The benefits are greater than the burdens. What sort of burdens? Benefits can be anything. Benefits can be cure, rare in medicine, longer life, by years, by months, by weeks. I want to get to my daughter's wedding. Right? A better quality of life than you enjoy. I want to garden again. I want to be able to go back to work. There are different benefits that we could articulate that are different than being cured of the disease, right? I want to be pain-free. What are some of the burdens of medical treatment? Cost. That's a tough one. It shouldn't be, but it is. There's a practical aspect to it. You can have a triple transplant. It's going to cost $400,000. You have to go to Philadelphia. You have to stay there for recovery. Don't worry, we have a hotel across the street. And your family has to come. That's a fortune, right? If you don't have it, it's not paid for by insurance. Well, how do you decide that? Especially if, how do you decide that? So cost, it's a big one. Shouldn't be. We can't let cost militate against choosing some simple, basic, almost routine things now, like dialysis or kidney transplants or surgery of different kinds. But even that gets very expensive. So if it's quality of life that starts to determine whether or not we're allowed to spend the money on these procedures, that's not good. If they're medical definitions and medical criteria, that's probably acceptable. Would it be okay to say, nobody over 65 gets the flu vaccine, we're short this year? Probably not fair, right? Hey, no fair. We say, we vote no fair. But so there would have to be medical reasons. Why do people over 65 get a double dose of flu vaccine? Because it's necessary because of the immune system, right? It's a medical determination. It's not. Well, wouldn't it be better if everybody got that? I demand it. Here we go. So the cost can be a burden. What else is a burden that we're allowed to say no to a treatment for? I mean, according to the church, yep. Prolonging dying, especially, right? When we start to die, there's agreement in the church. You just be with the person who dies, help them be comfortable, but you don't prolong dying as opposed to try to heal. And that's kind of one of the concepts of hospice. What else? Pain of the treatment.
Side effects from the medication.
Side effects from the meds. You know, chemotherapy, you really have to decide if you're going to go through chemo and they tell you the side effects. And now you sign a 43-page document about, you know, everything from you might have a little itching to you might be dead. You know, and it's like, okay, thanks. Now I feel terrific. I'll sign this document. The dump that's happening upon us, the information dump that patients get now, because physicians are not, well, for lots of reasons, but partly so that we're informed, which is a good thing, but also, but not a good thing if you expect really me to make that judgment for myself, and you don't take any responsibility for when I say yes. That's not a good thing. Distance, inconvenience, fear. I never want them going in my head. Well, talk with mom if there's, you know, simple surgical procedure that can be done, but it's, you know, that's a feasible reason after discussion and discernment and the person being rational to reject a treatment. Okay? So there has to be reasonable hope it's going to help, and the burdens, whose burdens, whose benefits? The person. The person, not the doctor, not the nurse, not the family. You see it the opposite way, right? Sometimes there's this uncomfortable pressure. You know, mom's dying soon, and the whole family's here. 3 people are from California, 2 people are from the South. Like, if we fly home, are we going to have to come back again soon? Because we'd really sort of, and you hear this pressure. Well, just get it over with sooner while everybody's here. Why not? That clinically, pastorally, we see this, and that's not okay. So it's the patient's burdens and benefits. Oh, okay, good. You have that in handout, the burdens and the benefits. So there, again, like mortal sins, there's no list so much anymore. The kids in school are always fascinated when I say, missing Mass on Sunday one time, mortal sin. They say, what? What? No, the idea now is more important than the thinking process of through what's a mortal sin. Same way. There's no ordinary list. It's a thought process and the concepts. I think we're doing okay. 15 minutes. Okay, so a thorny issue. We've established the notion that we can refuse unwanted, extraordinary medical treatment for reasons of that it's not going to be helpful, or that to me, the burdens are worse than the benefits. How about food and water? Nowadays, that means feeding tubes or not feeding tubes, and that's kind of a controversial area. The bishops all our bishops are discussing and praying and discerning it. Until there was not as much opinion expressed, I would say, in favor of feeding tubes all the time, or mostly all the time clinically, until John Paul, a couple of years ago, near the end of his life, gave a talk where he talked about taking somebody's feeding tube away is tantamount to starving them, and we ought to be feeding people, implying with feeding tubes more than we are. It's like that's probably an unfair summary for those who think he didn't say that, but exactly what he said and why he said it is controverted as well. But he didn't settle the issue, is what I'm getting at, right? There's 2 ways to think about medical fooding people. Yeah, that's like fooding people. Food we eat, right? Medical treatment, you get fooded if it's a medical treatment. So when something gets, as Catholics, and here's the reason I think, well, let me get to the teaching first, and then the reason I think we're so neuralgic about it has to do with Eucharist. Is it a medical treatment, or is it a human obligation we need to give each other all the time? When someone says, I want nothing, do nothing for me, do they mean that? What do they mean in general? They mean, okay, no surgery, maybe no IVs, don't take blood anymore, but they don't usually mean turn out the lights, I don't need bed sheets, the heat is optional, do what you want, don't come and check on me. They don't mean all those things, right? They mean take care of me, keep me comfortable, but I don't want medical therapy. So we have that idea, but we just don't know. So we have this area where it becomes not clear. We've all seen this kind of ridiculous scenario where the person is perfectly capable of eating but can't get out of bed, and the dietitian will come in and put the food at the foot of the bed or on the windowsill and then leave, right? And so the person goes back, oh, you're not hungry? I can't get to the food. All right? So that's different. When our illness makes us not be able to get to the food, so when we can't come to the table, when we can't chew, many hospice where they'll puree the food. They'll feed the person when they can't all right, eat. How about when we can't swallow? The fact that feeding tubes are so easy to put in, relatively speaking, and affordable and easy to work once they go in has made them pretty much standard of care or commonly used. But the question is still, when a feeding tube is necessary, is it a medical treatment, which can be turned off like all the other ones? No IV, no Foley catheter, no surgery, no, I don't want any of that. Or is it something like the lights, the heat, our prayers, our compassion, that have to be provided out of human obligation to each other, even if by tubes? The bishops don't 100% agree on either side of this, okay? So where are we? Well, as thoughtful Catholics, we can discern that, and generally speaking, can make our decision based on everything I've talked about, Catholic principles, Catholic teachings, except and unless we're in a hospital or Catholic facility that has an interpretation of the rules that insist on it, that might, let's say, insist on a tube more than we would want one. In which case, we are free to go to, or be transferred to another facility which can do what we want and not force the Catholic hospital to let's say in their view, would be to watch someone starve or starve someone, okay, with the feeding tubes. But that's a kind of a complicated issue, and I think we probably have, I'm not going to talk about physician-assisted suicide much, but, and in New Jersey, there's a tradition kind of going back to of at least a decade or so ago, that there tends to be a more strict interpretation that medical feeding tubes are a moral necessity because that's a creature obligation that we need to give each other and not a medical treatment, not a simple medical treatment. Probably that's a better way to think about it. Yes.
Just something that I was told by a member of the medical community, and you, the doctor, I'd appreciate your opinion on this, but I was told that towards the end of life, when it's evident that sometimes feeding, giving nutrition, can be more detrimental, depending on, what the organs are shutting down or whatever. It can be more detrimental than withdrawing.
Did everyone hear that? That sometimes feeding people, okay. Let's look on there. There's actually more agreement here than first meets the eye. It's clear for everyone that if someone's dying, they don't need to be fed. Okay, so what does that mean? It means not 6 months ago, when a diagnosis is made of 6 months, likely you'll be dead in 6 months. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean the diagnosis of a fatal illness. It means when you've entered the process of dying, and when that exactly is, I think, is difficult to determine medically. But okay, so that's one. What would you guess? It's days, weekish, 2 weeks, maybe. But it's not months. Yes.
I think sometimes the situation comes into play.
Yeah.
Because if you have a young girl that I know of that has dystonia and can't swallow,
Uh-huh.
and she's like 30 years old, she has a feeding tube.
Right.
And her life is full. She does computer.
Right, sure. I wouldn't ask anybody here that people are walking around with feeding tubes now, especially in their bellies. We wouldn't even have a guess.
The situation.
So we're not saying that you can't have them or you won't. So,
On the other hand,
Right.
And she couldn't talk, she couldn't speak, she couldn't move, and she was 84 years old, and they wanted to put a feeding tube in. And my niece declined it, because my sister had a living will that said she didn't want extraordinary means
Mhm.
to keep her alive if she could no longer function.
Mm-hmm.
And so my niece had that power of attorney or
Right.
whatever, and just, they didn't like
Yeah,
it.
all those
She died
circumstances
so-
are very touchy, yeah,
Yeah,
very,
it's a
very, but it does
situation.
depend on the situation. That's the idea of burdens, benefits. I'm sorry, what question was I getting to the answer of?
As they are going towards their.
Oh, okay.
the dying process to-
Thank you. So if death is happening, it's not. If it's medically contraindicated, so, there's cancer in the belly, or there's a bleeding disorder, or there's some other reason why if you put this feeding tube in, then don't do it. Or it's not working. The food goes in, it sits there, vomits it up. the gut. So under those circumstances, totally agreed, don't need them. And in places where if it's going to keep you alive and functioning and well-nourished, then yeah, you certainly should have them. In between some of those, that's where it's touchier. That's where you need to work it out, yes.
In my family, I wondered how you would agree on something like this. A 97-year-old person going in for a very serious, costly surgical procedure, who wants to have it done, and her family is all for it. How would you feel? My children are horrified at that. They come home, they're so angry.
Wow.
97 years old.
Yeah, the only reason, now, assuming a couple of things about the medical profession, right? That they're not simply going to want to operate on anybody to make money. And they're going to prudently advise you to not, they're going to prudently advise you if medically you're doing something crazy. But generally speaking, the surgery is safe for people who are older and older and older. And the idea that there's an arbitrary age cutoff for some kind of treatment with surgery is probably not good medicine these days. Father?
Can I just add something to that? You can look at a 97-year-old person, you can look at a 75-year-old person. 75-year-old person be in worse shape than a 97. All you ever need to do is get away from age, look at the person.
Now, driver's licenses, that's another. I'm teasing. But you know, in geriatrics, there's old, 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 and elderly old. There's like different categories now. And so an arbitrary saying you're too old, you know, we could come up with scenarios where it might not be prudent to do surgery on a 97-year-old, but not automatically, no. Yes,
So then, just going back to the hydration and nutrition.
yes.
Would it be fair to say that if, I guess, a distinction of actively dying and absorption?
Right.
So that would be the understanding that it could be discontinued?
Yeah, the question is about the feeding tubes when we're dying being unnecessary or useless. And when we're dying, things start to shut down. And so then a tube could be removed. But here, back the old way of thinking, no, you can't take the tube out, it's been put in, and you know, calm down. Yes, what's the circumstances? Yes, we can.
Because having worked in a Catholic facility, the nutrition was not so much an issue as much as at least the hydration.
Hydration. Sometimes it's not so much that we need the calories, but that we need some water. It's remarkable how little water we actually need than what you'd think. So that's very oftentimes sips of water or sips of ice are enough to hydrate someone who's basically very thin and not got a lot going on in their bodies. If the body is dying, much more comfortable than we would think. So this idea that people dying are thirsty, no one really knows how to discern that 100%, but it doesn't look like many experts say it doesn't look like we're torturing someone who's dying by not giving the water. Rather, they may not choke on it, and that might be a better thing in the long run. But we're trying to study this and understand the dying process, because as we talked about this morning earlier, that's not what medicine was doing for a long time. This is just, I gave you handouts about the physician-assisted suicide, why it's not a good idea, why, that's what we've been talking about for the last hour almost, why it's unnecessary. You can look at those on your own. What I wanted to do was kind of give you some big principles with which to understand all the documents and the choices that we make about food and water, feeding tubes, what procedures are necessary and why. Okay, we have like 5 minutes for questions. The best kind of questions, well, there's no bad question, but as like a broad kind of question to clarify something I've said rather than a specific case. Yes, sir.
I'm the Eucharistic minister at a nursing home. Over the years, I've seen patients, residents, in their beds thrashing around. They're not, you couldn't give them communion, they're not communicating. Lately, it seems as though they found the pain medication that has, morphine is a wonderful thing.
Okay.
But they're laying there, absolutely no life, no quality of life. And yet, month after month, there they are, still laying there in that bed. And cost obviously becomes a question. And it's something I look at that way. I personally say, God, take them.
What's your first name?
Tom.
Tom? So Tom is the Eucharistic minister, an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion at one of the nursing homes and takes communion. Apparently, in his less recent experience, people were nursing homes, they can be yelling and screaming, be agitated either because they're in pain or just confused. It seems as though recently perhaps they have a psychiatrist on staff, or they've found other medication that has gotten everybody to be quiet and sort of more sedated. But what kind of quality of life is it when time after time after time he goes in and people are just lying there? And it's definitely, surely a sad and problematic scenario of the nature of human suffering, especially as we outlive as we live longer and longer, sometimes with not our mind able to keep up with where our body is and vice versa. But that's a really deep spiritual question about the meaning of why they're there. When we start to talk about the quality of life and say, you can't hold down a job, and you can't hold a conversation with me, and so that means we should not be with them, care for them, treat them if they're sick, and then put them to sleep in mercy. That's a giant step that we can't take. But it is a dilemma about suffering in places where it seems as though we don't know what people hear, for one thing, cognitively, and hearing is probably the last thing we do, so people may enjoy conversations. One of the things that happens is that as we get older and as we experience infirmity, our threshold for what we would not ever have drops. So what I might say if I write a living will when I'm 30, or I might say I'm 65, I never want to be in a nursing home. And then you say, okay, so Mom, never in a nursing home. But then you go to like the reasonably comfortable looking ones, and it's for a leg injury. You're okay, whether you can text and talk to friends. Oh, well, that's all right. Near the end of my practice, the hospice care was just starting. And had an elderly lady, I tell this story often. She came into my office. There weren't papers to sign. There weren't anything. She said, well, you've been my doctor a while. Yep. She just had arthritis, and she was elderly. And she said, I guess so you'll probably be my doctor around the time I'm dying. She goes, I just want you to know, no machines. So I said, no machines? No, none of those breathing machines. I don't want a breathing machine. So I said, well, all right. Suppose you have pneumonia, and you're just like you are now, but you're blue and tired, and you can't get oxygen, and we think maybe a week or two on the respirator with some antibiotics, and you'd be back to the way you are now. You don't want that? She said, oh, yeah, I want that. So, her list was like, okay, wait, we need to enlighten you a little bit about your list. We have like 2 minutes.
The difference between hospice and palliative care?
The difference between hospice and palliative care, I don't know. You're not asking an expert, but I don't think there's too much of a difference.
How does the current medical ACA deal with this issue after age 72, when there's supposed to be a meeting of the mind to determine whether it's economically feasible to treat someone?
When we start to make decisions about who gets health care and whether an age is a financial decision, the church would support the notion that they should be medically based decisions. So they might say, for instance, anybody who has, this is not true necessarily, but anybody with hepatitis C in their blood, active molecule, active virus, shouldn't get a liver transplant because the 5-year survival rate is 1% and all the livers are rejected, and something like that. Or a medical-based treatment. Or if they studied groups of patients and they all died after a procedure, get past a certain age, that would be a medical reason to say, whoa, we better not do that then, as compared to an arbitrary cutoff to save money. Now, they're complicated because they're very well linked, as we know, but that's, I think, the last time. Sorry, we have to move along. Questions are great. Thank you for your interest. I want to stay 11, right? Oh, 15. Whoa, we have like, holy, thank you, God. I mean, deacon. We have some more. Yes.
When does quality of function factor into all of this?
Yeah, quality of function. For a long time, what's quality of function as opposed to quality of life? All these decisions are very complicated. For a while ago, there was a big flurry in the medical literature about futility. And they were going to try to come up with futility measures of like, well, you need dialysis? It's futile. Well, on whom would medical dialysis be futile? Futile, F-U-T-I-L-E, useless. And they surrendered the project because it a lot of times came down to function. In the early days of renal dialysis, let's say in Washington State, there were panels. They called them death panels. When the machines were very rare, and who got on dialysis, it's a life-prolonging treatment, was determined by a committee who basically looked at your social worth, not only your medical treatment, but your social worth. So, a priest, we wouldn't have any chance of getting anything, right? No family, no spouse, no children, and that's the kind, no high-paying job, right? But that's kind of the criteria they use, at least some of them. So when we look at function or value or worth of a life, that's when the church gets very nervous about making judgments like that. But when we say, should an alcoholic get a liver transplant? Well, let's not say automatically no, but let's look at the data. What happens if they do? And then make a decision that way, right? Yes. So we avoid that notion of
In terms of the medical care system that we have and how it's changed and versus like Canada or England. When my husband was 51, he had something happen there, 5% chance of survival, very expensive surgical procedure in front of him, and being grateful to be in this country who had it and we lived to see my son graduate college.
Oh, awesome.
But, I've worked with physicians in Canada. It's a very different system.
Yes.
England as well, and given those circumstances, they probably, the medical care system would have said, yeah, we're not going to do that procedure. And I don't know how you feel about, the changes that are happening under the U.S. system.
Yeah.
Are we moving more towards that, which I think is sort of scary.
She shares the notion of other systems, medical systems in, like, say, Canada, or where there's socialized medicine or more socialized medicine than here, making a different kind of healthcare decision on somebody who, whether or not to go for the cure, go for the treatment, have it, because it's going to be very expensive, or what we really haven't done a good job of deciding is understanding that there are finite resources for medical care and medical treatment, and how to fairly distribute them. We've done no better with money, right? I mean, and it's kind of related. So each time we try to address it, we try to say, well, no, let's not make a cost-based decision, but it partly is cost-based. Yes.
Do you feel that the Catholic Church is being sufficiently strident in supporting hospice care?
Do
Are
I,
they talking about it as much as they should be talking?
to be in favor of hospice care or against it?
For hospice.
For hospice care. Do I think that the Catholic Church has been a strong enough proponent of hospice care? I think, I think genuinely speaking, yes. I mean, I don't hear, you're probably not, let's see. You won't hear anybody generally speaking out against it. Sometimes in local instances where there's an overuse of narcotics and they have this philosophy about, uh-oh, here comes the hospice nurse, call the funeral director. Okay, that's not the way we talked about any of these principles. But there's one of the wonderful things, how when it works really well, there's a flow of money and staff and care potentially available for people who are on hospice. What we have to do is make sure that we don't financially incent people to get on it so that we can give them lots of morphine. And Father?
Hospice of Hope was started by a Catholic priest who passed away, but that continued. You look at some hospices throughout the country, and they're run by sisters and religious. So the Catholic Church is very much for hospice care. So I would have to say that. We might not see that in
Right.
this area of New Jersey, but in other parts, hospice care is very much favored by the Catholic Church.
Yeah, I'd certainly, I mean, you go back in history, if you just even pay attention to the saints we celebrate each week in the liturgy at Mass, many of them were taking care of plague victims who had no hope, and people on ships out in the harbor who were dying. So this kind of idea of caring for the dying has been a mission of the Church ever since the resurrection. So, in general, and a Catholic hospice, I think a Catholic hospice has a different philosophy than than a secular hospice, and the way they use pain medicine would be better. The way they deal with suffering would be different. So, yes, I think it's good news that has to get out more. It's something the Church isn't against. Good. Let's read it. Yes.
I was wondering, can Catholics donate their body to science?
Can Catholics donate their bodies to science? A priest just did.
Okay.
Of our diocese. Okay, why would, yes, sure, we need to pay respect to our bodies even when they're dead, when they're not alive, because they're symbolic of, they still have a sacrality, a sacredness about them. They were the temples of the Holy Spirit, and not because we need them back again like we put them down, hopefully. They'll be better in the resurrection, right? There's no concern about missing parts, right? So the resurrection of the body, you're not left out if you give your eyes away or something. People have this kind of primitive notion, but it's a legitimate concern. As long as it's not an unethical purpose for the tissue or the body per se, and there has to be kind of informed consent so that the likelihood of what your body will be used for, it's important to at least try and get explained. Most people have the notion, I guess, that you're going to be in a medical school or, be dissected or be used as surgical to teach people how to do certain kinds of surgery. But there are many uses for bodies that we should know about, but it's fine.
My father did give his to a medical school, so
Uh-huh.
he probably did get dissected, but he wanted that.
Yes, and then the body needs to be, the remains need to be, the body needs to be respected at all times. That's why some of these exhibits that people get made into plastic, have you seen these body works? They're just bizarre. They're eerie, and they have this macabre attraction about them, but I don't think that's dignity of the body when they charge tickets and there's a dude on a horse riding a horse, and surely the two people having sex, we can agree, not prudent, right? So, but dissection and organ donation or studies for the tissue, yeah, fine. The tissue needs to be then collected, what's left, and either cremated or buried. It can't just be discarded. Yes, ma'am.
I had heard that Father Rochelle at the end of his life kept thanking God for the pain that he was experiencing so that he could offer it up in union with Jesus. But I'm asking you, don't you think that's a special grace given by God in order to experience and be thankful for that kind of suffering?
Everyone here, is there such thing as heroic sanctity about suffering at the end of life? In a way was the question. Benedict Rochelle said he was happy he got more suffering because it made him able to offer more up. Certainly if you read about the history of the saints through the history of the Catholic Church, oftentimes they prayed for that. That is heroic sanctity, not enjoined as a moral obligation on any of us. Not to be enjoined by us on others, because especially, right? Because that's good for you, right? So let's say Benedict Rochelle, if he was a religious superior and then said none of his brothers who wound up and would ever get pain medicine, no, he may decide he doesn't want any.
But didn't he receive like special graces from God in order to feel that way?
I mean, saints must when they decide to have that and decide to do that. So as long as the person is sane, it's their choice whether and able to talk, it's their choice whether to have pain meds or not. What would be some reason to postpone the use of large doses of pain medicine that might make somebody unconscious? Not forever, but just why might you postpone it? For reconciliation with family and God. So, right, the relative is coming from California. They want to say hello. They want to say goodbye. They want to embrace. They want to reconcile. The priest isn't here yet. You can make a good confession and celebrate the sacrament of the sick in an aware state. Those are good reasons to delay it. Not to avoid it at all together, but to not start a therapy which the doctors or nurses will say will likely render the person asleep for a long time. Okay, 4 minutes. Yes.
I just want to make something clear because I do work with a lot of people who are in chronic pain.
Uh-huh.
So when people say to them, I think it's a little heartless to say, oh, that's great that you're suffering, it's a gift from God. I hate when people say that
Yes.
to people because it makes them feel less than human, like somehow, well, oh, God singled you out just so you could suffer more.
Right.
So how do you respond to people when they say this to these folks that you're trying to help that are suffering terribly?
Well, to the people who are, how do you, when people say to someone who's suffering, you should be grateful, it's a gift from God.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, I think partly it partly comes from our struggle of not knowing what to say. So we say something, right? The best thing is to just shut up. Right? No, just more or less. In a nice, subtle way that won't get you fired. Be with the person. Be with the person. Hold their hand. Sing to them. Let them know you're there. Rearrange the bedclothes. Put your hand on their head, a place that doesn't hurt if you can find a place. Comb their hair. But not supply a solution to the church would. I don't know any seminary anywhere that would teach the priests to go into a visit and tell everybody who was suffering hardship that day, be happy and rejoice because God has chosen you to suffer. Now, John Paul said there are an apostolate of the suffering, though, right? And so we can talk about it. There's a way in which the mystery of suffering and for the Catholic faith can be discussed, and might even borrow some of that spirituality a bit, but not to be preached at when somebody's miserable. That's relieve pain first. Console. There's a slogan: cure sometimes, improve often, Console always. Consoler toujours was the French expression, and the last one is console always. We know we're not going to get the big cure most of the time. Sometimes we can make people better. Even not, always be there, console, with kinds of things that I said. Okay, so well, thanks for all your questions. Very interesting, and I'm sure the rest of the day will help illuminate it if you've got questions about that.